Welcome to This is What Democracy Sounds Like. I'm Kevin Prang. This program is a presentation of Metropolitan Congregations United. MCU is a community organization that brings together religious congregations, community groups, and individuals to work for a common purpose, to create a better life for all residents of the region. We work at the intersection of race, economy, political power, gender, and the structures of oppression at work within us individually, within our organization, and within the community. We are working towards building people's control of the government, building community control of the economy, expanding the public sphere, and creating structural racial equity. Today, my guest is Reverend Darryl Gray. Reverend Gray has been fighting for civil rights for over 40 years and is currently the chair of the Social Justice Commission at the Missouri Progressive Baptist Commission. Welcome, Reverend Gray. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. It's a pleasure being here. I'm a big fan of the work of MCU. The way that they educate and inform, engage, and mobilize people around social justice issues. So it's my honor.
Great, thank you. And we're going to have a broad discussion today, but in general, I want to talk about working for justice, both, shall we say, in the streets and in the halls of power. Reverend Gray has had experience both as a Kansas state senator and recently ran for Missouri state representative of the 77th district. So that's kind of where I want to take this discussion today. You've been working against discrimination for justice for a long time. What was it that got you started on this journey, and what spurred you to action that first time?
Growing up in the South, growing up in South Carolina in the 50s and the 60s, you're confronted with the reality of racism on a daily basis, segregation, Jim Crow, and so I guess that was my beginning. Integration didn't hit South Carolina until the late 60s, although Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954 addressed the segregation of schools and forced integration through the federal courts. South Carolina, I don't know what happened. The message got to us late, Kevin. And so in 1969, when we moved from an all-black high school to a integrated high school, our first pep rally, basketball pep rally, hundreds of students in the gym, black on one side, white on the other side. The doors fly open. White student comes in wearing Confederate clothes, Confederate flag, riding, believe it or not, in the gym, a white horse. I got up and walked out. Don't know why, but I do know why, but I got up and walked out. What I didn't know behind me were a couple of hundred students who walked out behind me. I was suspended from school for inciting a riot from high school. That was my first nonviolent protest that I led without knowing I was leading it. But after that, and since then, I've been involved and engaged, started working with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with the late Reverend Dr. Ralph David Abernathy. He recruited me with SCLC. Went on to work with Dr. Lowry, Mrs. King, Reverend Jackson, and a host of others. So it started in South Carolina, and here we are almost 50 years later, still trying to do the work for social justice and social change.
Okay, and what brought you to St. Louis since you've been around the country?
Cori Bush, Congresswoman elect Cori Bush. I had a church in Montreal that I was pastoring on the weekends, believe it or not. And during the weekday, I was still SCLC in Atlanta. I was working at the national headquarters, special assistant to the national president. And I met Cori Bush in Selma, Alabama, during the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March. She had brought a group of activists down from Ferguson to the celebration. We kind of met inadvertently, didn't even know each other. But we found ourselves in the same space. And a couple of months later, I invited her to speak at a national SCLC convention in Baton Rouge. I talked to Cori for all of maybe 10 minutes in Baton Rouge. and something about her just struck me. And I said, I'm looking forward to working with you one day. And a few months after the convention, she called me, said that they wanted to start a Southern Christian Leadership Conference here in St. Louis. I traveled out to St. Louis, met with ministers, met with activists, began the process of doing that. Then a couple of months later, she called me back. She said, we're going to have to put the chapter development on hold. I thought I had done something wrong. I said, why? What happened? She said, I'm going to run for the Senate. I said, good. Now, as a former state senator, I figured that was great. From the Ferguson movement, we're going from protest to politics to policy. Great idea. She said, no, not state Senate, U.S. Senate. And I paused, obviously. And I just said, listen, I don't do symbolism. I don't do the symbolic stuff anymore. I'm too old for that. Only substance. She said, it is substantive, Reverend Gray. She said, Jason Kander's running. He's going to win the nomination. He's running statewide. Usually in Missouri, when you run statewide, you have to start in the middle. As a Democrat, you start in the middle and lean right. She said, we don't want him to lean too far right. So I'm going to keep him honest. And I left my job with SCLC, kept doing my church on the weekend because they were paying my salary, and came to Missouri to be Cori's campaign manager. Worked for her first campaign, senior advisor for her second campaign. She won the congressional seat on her third campaign. So if anybody wants to blame anyone for Reverend Gray coming to Missouri, blame Cori Bush.
That sounds good. And thank you for that background, because those sort of details, I don't think most people know about Congressman-elect Bush. The story is always that she came out of nowhere. She didn't come out of nowhere. There's a lot of hard work behind that and a lot of thought and preparation.
Yeah. Well, and that is the reality. I think that it was interesting what promotes a Ferguson activist, single mom, nurse, protester to decide to run for the United States Senate with no political experience and no money, no structure, no organization. It was her heart. It's always been her heart. She's always had a heart for people. And I think the political astuteness on Congresswoman-elect Bush's part, even at that juncture of her political life, to say, let's keep him from going too far right. He's going to win. He's the golden boy of the Democratic Party. We get it, but, and understandingly so. I mean, being politically pragmatic, knowing that you have to kind of lean right. And Jason only lost by 3%, but Cori kept him speaking to issues that came out of the Ferguson movement, police accountability and transparency, criminal justice reform, in particular, those issues, police violence and militarizing police. And those were the issues. Those were the Ferguson issues. And I think that, I know that Cori was extremely successful in doing that. And the numbers that she got from that race are what propelled her to move to run in the congressional race against a Lacey Clay. And so, it is important. And I think that the whole idea of the movement, realizing that we have to, as you said earlier in your introduction, Reverend Jackson used to say that we have to be present in the streets and in the suites. I mean, he liked to rhyme. So, be it the State House, City Hall, the United States Capitol, we have to be present in all of these spaces. And Cori understood that more than people understood her. She traveled this state, Kevin. She went to counties, Jasper County, Miller County, that some folks said, Reverend Gray, don't take her. It's not that they're just red counties, they're racist counties. And I said, whatever you do, don't say that too loud, because if she hears you say it, that's the place she's going to want to go. And we did. We traveled in a lot of places, ended up in some rooms, Kevin, where you had 300 people, and 4 of them were Black. That was myself, Cori, and 2 other people with our campaign. And I remember one incident in Miller County where we had just finished a panel discussion. We were in the lobby getting ready to leave. And this guy walked up to us, 6 foot, a lot, cowboy hat, cowboy boots, cowboy belt, looking down at us. And I'm 6 foot. And he's looking down at us. And he looked at Cori and he said, "I'm going to vote for you." And we're all dumbfounded because we're like, man, we're lucky to get out of here alive, let alone with a vote. And I looked at him and, I'm reaching to see if I'm strapped. And Cori said to him, "Why?" And he said to her, "Because you showed up." We've learned, Kevin, that we have to show up if we're going to be successful in transforming this city, this state, this country. That we have to show up in places that we're gonna be uncomfortable and we're gonna be nervous and we might even just be downright scared. It may be intimidating, it may be threatening, it may even be dangerous, but we have to show up, and that's what Cori did. That's the movement. That's what we do now. It's just not protesting and boycotting. It's making presentations before city officials and county officials. It's going to the state legislature and dropping banners or giving presentations at public hearings or running for political office. We don't have an option of trying to do one thing at a time. We don't have that luxury. We have to fight our battle or battles on every battlefront. Our front line is north, south, east, and west. And so, Cori, people like Bruce Franks, Rasheen Aldridge, my heroes. Those are my heroes. They came out of the movement. They understood what was necessary, and they did what was necessary. And I tell you, more so why they're my heroes, because even after they got elected, they continue to be present in the streets. So I'm a Baptist preacher. I give long answers.
Oh, that's okay. Those are some things I was going to ask about anyways. And after our last election here this past November, our Republican Governor Parson won by a margin of 57% to 40% over Nicole Galloway. It was about the same margin of victory for Donald Trump within the state. And my reaction after that is, I don't know how we have conversations with people in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of an economic downturn, who decided that the status quo was better. But what you're saying is that showing up is so important, and that surprises sort of await us if we do, because I don't know what the path forward is if that's what the voters have selected.
And we looked at, I think you also know I'm a former secretary of the Missouri Democratic Party, trying to, advocate, public servant, politician, whatever. And we looked at it. As I said, Cori showed up as a Black candidate going into some very red counties. I do agree that the pandemic handcuffed us in a lot of ways in Missouri. Didn't allow us to go into counties to speak to voters in the traditional way, the way that voters are accustomed to, and that's face-to-face. Regardless if you are a Republican or a Democrat or independent or libertarian or whatever, all of us know that face-to-face is always going to be the best way, and we couldn't do that. I think Nicole recognized that was part of the problem. Corona pandemic was part of the problem, but we're still in Missouri. We're still in the the last state to give up slaves. We're still in a northern state that faces south. And outside of I-70, it's just like we use the old adage that once you get outside of Atlanta, you're in Georgia. Well, once you get outside of I-70, you're in Missouri. And so there's still a huge element of racial animus, bigotry, and hatred, and racial insensitivity and ignorance. That exists as well. And so coupled with the Trump dog whistle division, coupled with a good old boy, governor like Mike, the Democrats were faced in Missouri, were faced with so many obstacles that it was just hard to overcome them with all of the elements that I just mentioned. It was difficult to overcome. And I think that the other thing was, and I love Nicole Galloway, supported her with everything that I had, but I still don't think that as Democrats, we did enough, not just Nicole, but as a party, we did not do enough to try to go to 114 counties. You cannot automatically assume that because a county is red, that there are not enough people within that county, be they Democrat, Independent, or Republicans who have just had enough to make somewhat of a difference, maybe not in that county, but in the state overall. And so because we didn't have that overall strategy, we lost 500,000 votes. 500,000 votes in a state like Missouri are not a lot of votes, believe it or not, to overcome. We just, we had all these things, and I think that we kind of gave up. And then the last thing is, Missouri was Trump's to lose. It just was. Red state, it was Trump's to lose. We grapple with, well, if Biden had come, President-elect Biden had come to Missouri once or twice, not in St. Louis, not in Columbia, not in Kansas City, but maybe Springfield, maybe to Boot Hill. If he had maybe come, maybe St. Charles, spoke to more suburban folk, could that have made a difference? 2020 hindsight is a wonderful thing.
And that's the nature of the electoral college, I guess, too, where everybody's focusing on just a handful of states. And that brings up another question, too. I mean, you talked about the dog whistles from Trump, but our governor was participating in that, too. Some of the ads around the defund the police issue and the images used and making sure to use Cori Bush's image in those ads was essentially saying to rural voters, be afraid of the Black people, they're coming for your police. And it was playing on that racist fear theme. And that just seems like, how do we get beyond that sort of framing that's been established by our governor?
Yeah, I mean, racism is perpetuated by fear and greed and ignorance. The political greed that is real, not only in this state, but political greed is real. The ignorance is oftentimes based upon a lack of knowledge. And so it's easy to put an ad out disparaging urban areas, Black people, protesters, activists, outside of I-70, and so when you're dealing with the ignorance or a lack of knowledge, and then the biggest thing, fear, and he stoked the fire of fear for white Missourians, not just in the rural area either, in St. Louis too, in Columbia and St. Charles and Jackson County. And so I don't want people to think that this was simply rural versus urban. It wasn't. This was about fear. It was about white people be afraid because this crime that's going on in St. Louis and Kansas City and Springfield among Black folk are coming to a community near you. And that's what he was saying. He wasn't saying that crime is going to jack up your insurance policies or they're going to be breaking in your house. He was saying that public safety is about protecting white folk. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about defunding public safety, which means taking away money to protect you. That's what he said. And he used Cori Bush. Cori Bush was a lightning rod. Representative Rasheen Aldridge. Those were the two one elected official and one candidate that he definitely used. And it was shameful. It was disgraceful. But it was political reality. And we didn't do enough to push back. You had the Democratic Party that kind of distanced itself from defund the police.
Right. They spent more time backing away from the phrase than calling out the governor and his racism is kind of what I felt was happening.
And exactly. And just saying, listen, this is our understanding as a party that defunding the police is about reallocating funds. Mm-hmm. It's about saying, why are we spending over 50% of our budgets, be it city budget, county budget, or whatever, on public safety, and spending less than 10% on public housing or public education or health or human resources or healthcare? That was the discussion. That was the real argument that we had. You defund education, you defund public health, you defund public housing. So that's what we were trying to say. And sometimes, I learned this when I was working with SCLC a long time ago with an old activist called Golden Franks. He said, sometimes our language has got to be the motivating factor to start a conversation. It is in the language. And I heard President Barack Obama just say recently that could be problematic, that we can lose an audience. But and once again, I think Barack Obama was the best president that I've ever known in my lifetime. And I understand what he said. I get it. But for that audience that we lose because we say defund the police, maybe they weren't part of the family in the first place. And that would be my argument. I say continue to have the conversation, continue to educate, continue to inform. That's what Dr. King taught us. He said, before you mobilize, you get your information, and then you educate. You educate the public. And that's what we're trying to do through the whole conversation of defund the police. Now, their bigger issue was when Congresswoman-elect Bush said, defund the Pentagon. Now, that's what really got him crazy. When she said that, Lord, the ads went up, Kevin.
Right.
And you had Democratic candidates who seemed to be shell-shocked. I understood. Dr. King talked about the fact that we spend so much money in the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. He talked about the money we spend on bombs versus the money we spend on bread in a country where so many people are living below poverty, and especially in St. Louis. And I think Congresswoman-elect Bush understood that she has 20,000 employees at Boeing in her congressional district. But I know, I'm gonna say Cori, she'll always speak from where she believes is a position of truth. And so when she says it, her interpretation, her understanding is the same as Bernie Sanders and others who say we are spending too much money on the military and not enough money on feeding people or taking care of homelessness or some of these other issues that are contributing to the crime in our cities. But, as you said in the beginning, Parson and the Republican Party continue to look for ways to divide us as a state, as a country, versus trying to bring us together. And that's something that is a continuous fight.
Right. That brings me to another question, whether it be if you were to be elected or in the case of Congressman-elect Bush, bringing the energy and the words of activism to the halls of power, which are not used to those things. What kind of things is she going to be up against? Is she need to look to do in order to actually get things done, to build coalitions? They say that politics is the art of compromise. And so there's that balance that has to be struck where we all love the energy and the passion, but there are, I'm forgetting my numbers now, 437 other Congress people to work with. So where does that balance strike? And from your experience, where do you find that balance?
I mean, I'm a progressive Democrat. Even as a Baptist minister, I know that some people might think that that's an oxymoron, but I'm a progressive Democrat. And what I learned as a state senator, what I've learned as secretary of the Missouri Democratic Party, what I've learned as a public servant is that in order to affect change, we have to affect policy. In order to affect policy, we need to be on the inside. We need to be in the suite. We need to be in the room. Cori is going to have to, Congresswoman-elect Bush is going to have to find a way to speak truth to power at the same time as compromising, not her principles, because I believe that when people find out that Cori Bush is Cori Bush, she's not pretending, she's authentic, she's genuine, she's the real deal. I think that will gain their respect. They'll see that her success is based upon her ability to create coalitions and form alliances. She won her election because of a coalition, not because of Black votes. Congressman Clay had more of the Black votes. Congresswoman-elect Bush had a coalition support behind her. So I think that what she'll do once she is inaugurated and starts moving is trying to figure out who are my coalition partners. And I'm not talking about just the AOC crowd, but those center Democrats, people like Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, who has already reached out to her, and she's reached out to him and has asked him to mentor her. So already her political astuteness is such where she has already reached out to a Congressman Cleaver, a senior congressman, and said, mentor me. She's part of the progressive wing. So she already has 100 plus other progressive Congress people with her. But she has enough political sense to reach out to an Emanuel Cleaver and say, mentor me. It's going to be the Emanuel Cleavers who are going to walk her through the halls of Congress, not necessarily the AOCs or even the Bernie Sanders. It's going to be the Emanuel Cleavers, the moderate Democrats who are going to introduce her to other moderate Democrats and compassionate conservatives. so that she can benefit St. Louis and the 1st Congressional District. She's already begun to reach out, and that's going to definitely benefit the 1st Congressional District.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit locally then here. St. Louis, the city, it seems like we take a couple steps forward, then we go backwards. For instance, the workhouse, we've been told it was going to be closed. Now that's being postponed. What do you feel like is getting in the way of the city making progress? Silo
politics. We have 28 older people who are going in 28 different directions. Every now and then, you'll have clusters of older people around one issue that might go the same way. You might have the cluster of progressives around privatization. You might have the cluster of Black caucus around the issue of ward reduction. You might have this cluster going, it's just the way it works. And it has been an impediment to progress in this city forever. That's the reality. I think ward reduction is going to make a difference because you'll have 12, I can't remember the number, I think maybe 12 older people, 12 older people, 14 max versus 28. I think that will make a difference. It forces older people, again, to focus on coalition building and working with alliances and working with different groups versus only working with their friends and family. I mean, anytime you can become an older person with less than 35% of the vote, you can become mayor with less than 35% of the vote, it's a problem. Proposition D, I think, has helped us tremendously. Once again, it forces citywide people who aspire to be citywide officials to have to work outside of their own little group. And so silo politics has been one of the biggest problems. People just looking out for their own self-interest and or ward interests. The other thing is developers in this city basically run this city. Developers rule. Rex rules. Paul McKee rules. That has been part of the problem in this area. When you have Civic Progress and the Regional Chamber of Commerce, who are the biggest lobbyists in this region, who continue to dictate public policy versus the public dictating public policy, you're always going to have issues. When public officials have to first find out what developers and business entities want before they make a decision, that's always going to be a problem. When Centene rules, when we're more concerned about what Centene says than what the voter says, you're always going to have a problem with politics in St. Louis. It's really not a north-south divide. It is a 28 ward divide. And that's the reality.
So introduce me to Expect Us. How did that start and what is the mission of that organization?
Expect Us started after the Jason Stockley verdict, when Jason Stockley was acquitted for the murder of Anthony Lamar Smith, September 15th, 2017. That day sparked 4 months of protests in St. Louis. We believe that there was no accountability with police violence in this city. And so 4 months of protests around the Jason Stockley issue. And I was invited into a group of young activists, frontline activists who had come out of the Michael Brown murder protests, the Ferguson uprising. And I was asked by Cori Russell, Alderman John Collins Mohammed, and Michael Hassel to connect the protesters with the clergy. They saw my work working with Cori, because all of the protesters worked with Cori. So they had seen my work with Cori, and they said, can you set up a meeting between protest organizers and clergy? Because we're going to need a united front in moving forward as we protest the Stockley verdict. And this was prior to September 15th. So there was already the feeling that Stockley was going to be acquitted. That feeling was already out. So people had started planning prior to September 15th. So I coordinated a meeting between religious leaders and protest leaders at St. Luke's Baptist Church. Jimmy Brown is the pastor. And we talked about working together. And what we had to talk about first was overcoming a rift that had taken place between clergy and activists during Ferguson. So we kind of got through that. We agreed to do some listening sessions between activists and clergy to give activists an opportunity to share their frustrations with clergy leadership, or what protesters felt was the lack of clergy leadership around social justice, particularly within the Black community. So we got through that, and clergy were invited to participate in the protests, primarily serving as buffers between the police and the protesters. People like David Girth and Teresa Danley and so many others with MCU. MCU helped us out tremendously. Karen Anderson was the president. Reverend Dr. Karen Anderson was the president of MCU during the time. People like Rabbi Susan Talvey and others. And so it was MCU, along with other clergy groups, who set up safe spaces for protesters, who helped provide secure equipment, be it hand warmers or milk or mask, or just anything that we needed during the protests. Clergy groups like MCU and others helped to provide. And I was the liaison between the protesters and the clergy groups. Almost at the end of the 4 months of protests, we realized that we needed to stay organized, that we could not just show up. We couldn't do pop-up protests, that we need to become more organized in what we were doing. So Lala Moore and Cheyenne Green and Ebony Williams and a few others decided on this name, Expect Us. Before that, we were just Frontline. And they decided, no, we expect us. Why? Because if there is discrimination somewhere, you need to expect us. If there is police violence somewhere, you need to expect us. If there is, whatever the issue might be, you need to understand that we're going to show up. And so just expect us. And they were the three that came up with the term expect us. And we all agreed to it, and it kind of moved out of Stockley. Since Stockley, the Expect Us movement has been involved, as I said, in political activities, doing presentations to government officials, and then George Floyd happened. And Expect Us, I would say, has been the leading organization around protest organizing, not just in the region but in the state, around the George Floyd murder, the Breonna Taylor murder, and others. And I'm just honored, really, Kevin, to be part of a group of young, bright, courageous, committed activists who are willing to put their all on the line to make this city and this state and this country better.
That kind of leads me to one of my last questions is what brings you hope and how do you keep your spirits up through all this?
It's not easy, Kevin. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. There are many days that I just, say, I'm tired. I've been fighting this fight for almost 50 years. But when you see the successes of a Cori Bush, when you see the commitment of a Rasheed Aldridge, when you see the work of MCU and Progressive Baptists and the clergy coalition who have really come into their own under the leadership of Bishop Hankerson, when you continue to see the coalitions and the alliances form, people like Megan Green, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and the work that she does on city council, the election of a Wesley Bell and the work of a Kim Gardner, prosecutors who believe in criminal justice reform. When you continue to see the movement that came out of the George Floyd murder, young people, this intergenerational movement who continue to show up, that gives me hope. It lets me know that I can reach back and pass the baton, and there are so many hands who are ready and willing and able to grasp it and run their leg of the race, and to do it unapologetically, and to do it without wavering, and to do it with the kind of commitment that would make a Rosa Parks or a Fannie Lou Hamer or a Dr. King proud. That's what gives me hope. I'm watching this next generation of leadership emerge and take their place. And because of them, I don't feel no ways tired.
Okay, good. And I think my last question is, are there any actions or activities coming up that you just want to give a shout out to, or things starting in the new year? What do people need to be looking on the horizon for?
I mean, there are so many things. I think that from a state point of view, there are legislators that are trying to push through legislation to diminish the work, really put in jeopardy, and I mean physical jeopardy, the lives of protesters. There's a bill that is going to be that has been introduced or filed that would give immunity to drivers who run into protesters. If drivers fear for their lives, they can get immunity if they run over a protester or hit a protester. That's something that we're going to be fighting in Jeff City. I think that we need to be watching this thing about the evictions. I know there's a moratorium now. That moratorium may be lifted in January or February. We need to watch out for that. It's going to disproportionately affect people of color. Those two things we need to be mindful of. And just, I guess the last thing, we're going to have an election for mayor in the spring. Whoever wins needs to have a clear message on how they will deal with developing the north part of the city. There needs to be a clear strategy, not just lip service, of speaking to the issues of poverty and crime in this city. And once again, not lip service. We cannot and should not elect someone just because they're Black. We cannot or should not elect somebody just because they're female. We need to elect a mayor who has a plan to deal with the reality and the issues of this city. And so, once again, a lot of things in this city, in this state, that we're going to be up against in the new year. Protesters and politicians need to work hand in hand to make this city and this state better. And I believe that there are people out there who are committed to doing just that.
Okay, great. I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's been a joy talking to you, and I've learned a lot about some background of some things that I just didn't know as much. So thank you for joining me today.
Kevin, it was a pleasure, and thank you for the work that you do. God bless you.
Thank you. And to learn more about MCU, go to Metropolitan Congregations United website at mcustlewis.org. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for news and events. I'm Kevin Prang, and you've been listening to This Is What Democracy Sounds Like. Tune in again next time, and thank you for listening.